In just a few hours' time, South Africa's genocide case against Israel kicks off in the International Court of Justice. South Africa filed the lawsuit in December, accusing Israel of being in breach of its obligations under the 1948 Genocide Convention in its crackdown against the Palestinian group Hamas in Gaza. Israel's military assault has now killed more than 23,000 Palestinians, nearly 10,000 of them children. Justice Minister Ronald Lamola is expected to present opening arguments backed by a legal team of prominent jurists, including Adv Tembeka Ngcukaitobi, Adv Max du Plessis, Adv Adila Hassim, Adv John Dugard SC, with the support of former UK opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn. Let's get you some analysis this morning. We're joined by international relations expert Ayesha Kajee, who is with the Afro-Asia Dialogue. Ayesha, it's great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. And I think perhaps as a starting point, it's good for us to go back to the basics, right, of what qualifies as genocide. And as we do that, it's important to note that both Israel and South Africa are signatories to the UN's Genocide Convention.
Absolutely, and that's what's important about this case. Good morning, Michelle. The 1948 Genocide Convention defines genocide as acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. It goes further to include acts such as killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group and forcibly transferring people, including children of the group, to another group. So South Africa has very clearly stated in its 84-page submission to the ICJ why it considers that what is currently happening in Gaza is a genocide.
And South Africa also has a paper trail, doesn't it, Ayesha? There have been multiple statements from our government officials here at home warning of this looming genocide. Israel didn't respond officially. They didn't respond in writing, but the country has publicly denied violating the Genocide Convention.
Yes, I think, in the past when genocides have occurred, including, the genocide in Rwanda in 1994, we didn't have social media as widely available as it is today. So despite Israel's attempts to cut off communications from the Gaza Strip, with the kind of technology we have today, it's been impossible for Israel to actually prevent live news from coming out, video news, photographic evidence, audio evidence, text evidence from coming out of the Gaza Strip. And because of that, Michelle, what we have been seeing since October 7th has been the unfolding of a genocide in real time, accessible to members of the general public. And I think that is what has made the difference in this case, and what is going to make it very hard for Israel to refute the allegations of genocide, given that senior Israeli officials have also in public, including on national and international TV, gone so far as to state their intent of resettling the Gaza Strip, of taking the current civilian population of Gaza, 2.3 million people. They've already succeeded in moving a large number of that population from the north of the Gaza Strip to the south. And there is a very clear intent to actually move them out of the Gaza Strip and essentially clear the Gaza Strip for settlement. In fact, it's gone as far as journalist Yusuf Omar reports, as property developers, prominent property developers in Israel, advertising beachside homes for sale in Gaza, even while this war, this genocide is currently happening. So there is a very definite intent that can be demonstrated through the statements of the Israeli finance minister, the Israeli security minister, the Israeli prime minister, up to and including Mr. Netanyahu himself, to show that there is a clear intent to ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip. But this has now gone beyond ethnic cleansing, because remember that the Gaza Strip is the world's largest open-air prison. What that means is that Israel controls everything that goes in or out of the strip, whether that is building material, whether that is food, whether that is water, whether that is power, etc. And there was a question in the United Kingdom Parliament the other day where the Secretary of the Foreign Secretary was actually asked a question directly, where he admitted that Israel controlled water into and out of the Gaza Strip. And then he was asked a question, well, the holding back of water then is actually an intent to destroy or to kill the population.
Absolutely.
Because currently there is no clean water in Gaza. There is very little food in Gaza. There is no medical supply in Gaza. All the schools and hospitals have been destroyed. People have been moved en masse, as I said earlier. And as you yourself said, 23,000 people have died, and 10,000 of those, up to 10,000 of those, are children. So, you cannot call children terrorists, you cannot call civilian terrorists, and under international law, Israel is recognized by the ICJ already as an occupying state, and there are very, very clear guidelines as to what the responsibilities of an occupier towards the occupied is.
Intent is going to be one of the issues that South Africa's case is going to discuss. Jurisdiction will likely also be another important issue. Is there precedence insofar as, let's start with the issue of jurisdiction is concerned?
There isn't really precedent in terms of the issue of jurisdiction. As I said, previous genocides, previous ethnic cleanses have not unfolded in front of our screens, as it were, because we didn't have the technology then. So there were previous cases brought, including in the case of Rwanda, Sierra Leone, Yugoslavia, etc. But because it was difficult to quantify what was happening, because it was difficult to get that evidence as it occurred, evidence of mass graves, etc., was only uncovered afterwards. So that intent was difficult to actually clarify. But in terms of the jurisdiction, both South Africa and Israel are states parties to the International Court of Justice, which, by the way, is a civil court which mediates disputes between states. By contrast, the International Criminal Court is a court where Israel is not a states party. So it would be very difficult for South Africa to argue jurisdiction in that case when Israel has not ratified the Rome Statutes which founded the International Criminal Court. And that's part of the reason why South Africa is bringing this case in the International Court of Justice. Yeah. So I think with regard to jurisdiction, we're fairly clear. Both are states parties, and therefore both have an obligation under international law to actually come to the hearing, and in the case of Israel, defend itself, and of course in the case of South Africa, present its arguments for its case.
We can't have this discussion, Ayesha, without talking about the US, right? The US slamming South Africa's case, calling it meritless. Depending on how this case unfolds, depending on the outcomes of this case, the role and the complicity of the US will surely come under the spotlight even more.
It has already come under the spotlight unofficially, but I think it's going to come under the spotlight very, very clearly. And the Biden administration is currently very, very divided in the U.S. You've had senior members of the administration actually resign because of what is happening in Gaza. So I think what's going to happen is that the U.S. is going to be forced to acknowledge, at least in part, its complicity. As soon as South Africa brought this case, Michelle, we saw several countries which had been fairly supposedly neutral on this issue issue statements distancing themselves, for example, from the statements made in public by the finance minister and security minister of Israel. Germany, the Netherlands, are amongst those countries that immediately issued public statements on behalf of their governments, distancing themselves from the allegations, not the allegations, from the statements made by senior Israeli officials. That was very significant. Also significant is the number of states that have actually come to support South Africa's case at the ICJ. Amongst these Middle Eastern states such as Jordan, which has also in the last 2.5 months, while condemning Israeli actions and condemning the U.S. actions, has remained fairly neutral. But once this case was brought, very bravely, I might say, by South Africa, and symbolically also by South Africa, since South Africa is the only state to have had official apartheid, officially designated apartheid under its borders for so many decades. It's very symbolic that South Africa's brought this case, and it's going to increase pressure on both Israel and the U.S., let alone other traditional supporters of Israel, such as the Western European countries, including Britain. So in that sense, we're hoping that there may be sufficient pressure to at least bring about a cessation of hostilities for now. So this case is likely to take a long time to actually come to a final conclusion. But what can happen within a few weeks is an interim measure that will essentially order Israel out of the Gaza Strip. That is what we are hoping for.
Ayesha Kajee is an international relations expert with the Afro-Asia Dialogue. South Africa to request urgent relief to prevent ongoing acts of genocide against Palestinians living in Gaza. What will that relief look like, and will Israel abide, are some of the big questions we're asking this morning as well.